Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We're live from our Pontchartrain Production Studios. Got a great show for you as always. Fantastic guests on our panel tonight. Tommy KRYSAN of Talking Sports with TK Podcast and Jim DERRY of The Advocate, St. Tammany Farmer, and also VSN Louisiana. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. And of course, we'll talk a lot about the Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, and UNO tonight. Hit all the local teams. Always good to have you guys on the show. Jim's first time on the show. Tommy's been back. Tommy, before we get started, tell the folks about your podcast. What you got going right now?
Talking Sports with TK. It's available on all the major platforms, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Anchor, and many others. Going to have an LSU spring football preview coming out on Friday of this week. And a lot of other podcasts. Started one about Major League Baseball called Chin Music. And got Trey Blossman and I do sports takes. So we got a lot of things with all of that. And it's a lot of fun, a little LSU baseball stuff for you. You know me, I'm a baseball guy. So it's available on all the platforms. Connect with me on social media, and you'll always see a link because, as you know, I'm posting them always and doing a little bit of work for USSSA baseball in the state of Louisiana now, the little kids. So I still got my hand in the world of baseball.
And with the baseball, talk a bit about it, if you would, what you're doing with
marketing director for all the tournaments everywhere from Shreveport down to Chalmette.
And what is that again?
USSSA.
Okay.
Yeah, USSSA.
And that's
United States Sports Specialty Association. Oh, it's a worldwide operation based in Florida, and been in Louisiana for quite a while, primarily age 7 through 14. There are a few spots that have the older age kids, but it's a real good thing. I mean, I was at a tournament in Baton Rouge last week, 145 teams playing ball at 4 different facilities. So, but that's happening all over the state every weekend. You know, really starting now. There was been a handful of tournaments, and from now till June, it'll just be every weekend with more kids playing more baseball. That's their thing.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Jim, welcome to the show. Glad to have you for your maiden voyage here.
Man, how far did you have to go down the list? Like, he's not available.
Well, I mean, actually, Jim knows this. I've been asking for weeks now.
He has been.
But good to have you. Talk a bit about what you're involved in now, because again, a lot of folks know you from the Times-Picayune. You were there for years, but now.
Well, I'm kind of back. Right? Kind of back. I'm the sports editor of the St. Tammany Farmer, which is basically the North Shore wing of the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans Advocate. So glad to be back. I mean, I've been with them in some capacity, the Times-Picayune, for 29 of the past 30 years.
That's
so,
so you know where that building was next to
it's
next
sad.
door.
Sad.
It really is sad.
Yeah, it's right next door. It's sad to see. But I'm also doing play-by-play for Eric Ritchie at VSN Louisiana, and I'm thrilled about being able to continue to do that. I thank Eric so much for that. I've been enjoying it. We did a playoff basketball game Monday night. We're doing some stuff for Cox Sports Television, and we got a lot of stuff coming up the next couple months between baseball and softball. We just signed. We're the official broadcaster of the Louisiana High School Lacrosse League.
Okay.
And so we're going to be broadcasting 10 of their games of the week, and then all their playoffs and their championships. So we're thrilled. VSN Louisiana, if you haven't checked it out yet, check it out. There's a lot of past games and some docu-series that Eric's done, and just some outstanding things at VSN Louisiana.
Eric Ritchie, a mentor of mine, helped me a lot getting into this business, and a really dear friend. And I'm just so happy, again, that the VSN is growing like it is, because it has grown leaps and bounds since you guys started that a couple of years back.
Absolutely. It's getting bigger and bigger, and we're doing more and more stuff.
Yep, no doubt. Guys, let's start off with the Pelicans. And the last few weeks on this program, we've been talking about, I've been going into, what they're doing as far as, how many games they've won since the 6-22 start and the 0-13, over 13 debacle. And it looked like for a while there that they were really on a path to the playoffs. When you look at this now, they're 12th in the West. They're now 5 games back of Memphis. They're 26-36. It's something I talked about on the radio show. When everybody's been looking at Memphis, I kept saying, look behind you, because when you look at the teams that are behind you, they're not far away. And if you don't continue to win, they're going to catch up. And of course, this was a little bit of a tough stretch for them, having to play the Lakers twice in a few days and then having to play Dallas. The issue is, again, the performance they put up against Minnesota in the Smoothie King Center the other night, which probably is going to be the death nail for them getting into the playoffs. It's unfortunate because, again, if they would have played with the energy and intensity and effort that they played last night in an overtime loss to Dallas against Minnesota and again, other teams throughout this season, we wouldn't even be talking about, again, them trying to be able to eke into the playoffs with the 8th seed. Unfortunately, again, we haven't seen that. Look, injuries are a factor. But at this point, it's more of the issue with, again, not having that intensity game to game. Tommy, I'll take you first. Talk a bit about the Pelicans. Like now, I'm one that has said I really thought they had a shot. Even with the schedule they have left, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to be able to overcome where they are right now.
They've just been too inconsistent. They're not winning the games they're supposed to win, like the Minnesota game. And I watched that game, and I'm thinking, like you said, the lack of energy, the lack of enthusiasm. Well, you're a pro basketball player. You're in the NBA. You got to be able to bring it every night, especially when you're supposed to win the ball game. And they didn't do it that night and then turn around, and it hadn't been good since with the Lakers coming and Dallas. So, and I think that falls to the coaching. I mean, the coaches have to get these guys ready. And make sure they know they got to be ready. Especially, you can't lose the games you're supposed to win. Once every now and then it's going to happen because it's a long season. But I just don't see the consistency. I talked on one of my podcasts last week. Somebody said, well, it's not going to do them any good to get to the playoffs because they get swept in the first round. So what? Get to the playoffs.
Exactly.
Get that experience. Make that another step in the right direction. And as you said, now, you make a good point. They came from behind them, and now, it's going to be tough to get there a whole lot in that Minnesota game. You hate to put it all on one game, but, when you got 82 games, you say they're all important.
Right.
And you'll be able to look back at that one. But the other thing, I know they're trying to control the minutes for Zion, but he doesn't look in shape.
He's not in shape.
He looks tired.
Right.
He limps. His body language is bad. And I don't mean the little bit of a limp he's got because he had a severe injury, but, he's 19. I get all that. But I don't know if it's being managed properly.
Right. Well, to your point, Gentry really got upset with the media last night asking that question. And, again, that's a byproduct of Aaron Nelson, who, again, is the trainer for this team and pretty much has the final call along with doctors on the minutes that Zion will get. It's also on David Griffin, who's obviously made very, very clear that they're looking at this long term. They're looking at the long game, not the short game with Zion. But I think we saw a little bit of that fatigue last night coming off a 33-minute performance against the Minnesota Timberwolves and then having to come in and play, again, an overtime game against Dallas. So, look, I'm like you, 19 years old, get him out there, let him play. Gentry got a little upset with the media last night. It kind of is what it is.
I know the doctors take priority, but I'd almost playing 42, 43 minutes to get him in shape, because he came late and he had the injury. He wasn't in shape when he started playing, even though they waited, wanted to do it at home, all that stuff. He wasn't ready to go. And then, 8 minutes in the first quarter, and he's going to bench no matter what. Let him go all 12 minutes and then sit him the first 4, let him get in shape,
But Tommy, the problem with that is, though, if you watched last night, there was a point in the second quarter where it looked like he couldn't even get up the other end of the court.
That's right.
And they had to take him out. I mean, they couldn't get a timeout. There were like 2 possessions on each side before they could even get him off the court. And he was having trouble running back and up the court.
Yeah, good point.
But to me, Eric, there has been no point in this season where I felt like this team was going to the playoffs. Okay. Even when they started playing a little bit better, they never could crack that 2.5 back of Memphis thing. They beat Memphis. They showed that they can play with, they played the Lakers well at times, and including last week. But this team just can, and as Tommy said, cannot find consistency. My good friend Jeff Duncan of The Athletic said the other day, he says, there is no time ever that you can lose to a team like the Timberwolves.
It's the truth.
And give up 134 points in a game to a team that has been struggling, beyond struggling, and with their best player on the bench. It can't happen, and changes need to be made.
Yeah. Let's go there next, because I'm of the opinion the coaching staff is pretty top-notch. We talk about Fred Vincent all the time, what he's been doing in terms of helping these guys perfect their shooting stroke. It's not just him. He's a holdover from the previous administration with Monty Williams. He's been in New Orleans for a while. There are other coaches on that staff. Jamil McMillan, who is going to be a head coach one day in the league. There are some really good assistant coaches. The issue, and again now, if ultimately they miss the playoffs, and it seems they may now, Gentry's been here. Do you judge Gentry on this year with a new regime and based on a young team that is ascending, based on what we believe they'll be next year and the years to come, or do you judge him on his entire body of work here in New Orleans?
I think you got to judge the whole body of work, and then you got to look quickly. We live in an immediate world. Want to know, okay, if you don't make the playoffs this year, can you make them next year? If there's no injuries, can you manage this team? Can you push the right buttons, get the right groups on the floor to win games, especially the ones you're supposed to win? I would not be surprised if they don't make the playoffs if they don't make a change. But it would be one of those where they're gonna know who they're gonna get before they make a change. And if you can get better, somebody that you think can better run this operation, I think you got to do it.
Jim, what's your thoughts?
I don't think it makes a difference. I think they're both the same. Whether you judge them on the past 5 years or whether you judge them on this year, there's no difference. To me, I don't see what he's done. And look, I like Alvin Gentry. I think he's a nice man.
Sure, yes,
and
absolutely.
I think he's a great offensive mind. But they have not shown any progression on defense. The last night they played pretty good defense, actually. So you could take that one out of the equation.
Which means they can do it.
Which means they can, correct. But generally, overall, when you look at what they've done, I believe they're 22nd or 23rd in the league in points given up. I mean, it hasn't changed. It's been the same thing since he's gotten here.
Right.
And, injuries. I mean, losing Josh Reddick, does that matter for right now? That's not going to make the difference between whether they go to the playoffs or not. I think I said 2 years ago, I thought it changed. I really thought we had a coach in Monty Williams. I didn't think that the circumstances didn't work out. Everything that could go wrong for him did.
Yes.
And I think that if he were still here, I think this would be a playoff team. Yeah. I would love to see what Monty Williams could do with a Zion Williamson and a 19-year-old kid and a young nucleus of just wonderful young talent that this team has and can do, but I think some sort of change is going to be made. I don't think a change is going to be made, though. I actually would be surprised if they make a change.
It's interesting you talk about Monty Williams because again he had Anthony Davis. He really had the kid gloves with him his first year. Didn't play him a lot. We're kind of seeing that indirectly with Zion because of the injury. He's more of a defensive-minded coach. When he was here, his teams played defense. Again, it's the opposite when you start talking about Alvin Gentry with the run and gun approach. I am a fan of the Alvin Gentry system. I always have been. I think it's a system that works with the skill set of the players that they have here in New Orleans. I'm not a fan of Alvin Gentry, the coach, because again, I think that he has an assistant coach's mentality. And again, for those out there, assistant coaches are the conduit between players and the head coach. A lot of cases, they're friends with the players in some cases because players will go to them, complain, let them know what's going on within the locker room itself, and it's kind of a conduit to the head coach. this team could use a little bit more discipline. I understand the NBA is a players' league. There's no doubt about that. But you can't have nights like you had the other night when you're in a quote-unquote playoff race and you're losing to a team that won 17 games that has absolutely nothing to play for. That comes down, again, back to the coaching. And the question has to be asked, on a veteran team, I think Alvin Gentry works fine. But when you have a young nucleus and you're building a team from scratch around young guys like Zion Williamson, around Ingram, the rest of the Lakers that are here, Jackson Hayes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, et al., are you in a position to be able to keep a guy that would really work better if you had a group of veteran players that were taking the floor for you night after night?
Well, the veteran players can help create the mindset that, okay, we're supposed to beat the Timberwolves tonight. Right. Let's go out and do it. And if we fall behind double digits, what they did in the second quarter, almost got the 20-point lead, somebody's got to grab somebody by the collar and say, okay, we need to turn this around right now.
But who is that?
Well, I'm just saying.
Right.
It's the coach. Got to be a coach now because you don't have the veteran guys.
Right. J.J. Redick is a guy that's a vocal leader. Drew Holiday is not. Derek Favors is not. I mean, when you go down that lineup, the Laker guys have never won anything since they've been here. They're still young players. That's been the problem with this team really since the beginning when they put this team together. And I've asked that question since the beginning. Who's the alpha male in this team? Who's going to be that quote-unquote culture-driving veteran that David Griffin said he was bringing these guys in to be?
They don't have one. They don't have one. I'm sorry to interrupt, Tommy, but look, what works for the Saints? Sean Payton handles the offense, and there's no question who the alpha male is there, right? And Dennis Allen runs the defense, and if he disagrees with something, I'm sure he steps in. But that's what works for the Saints. That's what has worked for the Saints. Sean Payton steps in when he needs to step in when it's not related to the offense. The Pelicans don't have that. They need that. And Monty Williams, to me, was that. And he had assistant coaches, I thought, that helped on the offensive end. And they did the right thing with Anthony Davis. I think that the Pelicans now, I think they're doing the right thing with Zion, and there's so much other young talent. But unless these guys get groomed, and I don't feel like they're going to get groomed. I don't see that. So you got to hope something.
You don't have a lot of faith in Gentry.
I just don't. I don't. And again, I think that David Griffin is going to give him another opportunity. I think he's going to come back. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to be close. Let's see what happens in the lottery.
If they give him another chance, they've got to bring a veteran in onto the roster.
Well, they got a vocal veteran.
Yeah, somebody that's going to, because Gentry's not.
Right, a vocal veteran.
The team's a reflection of him.
Right.
Most teams are a reflection of their coach, any sport, any level.
Right.
And this is an example of that. These guys are passive just like Gentry is.
Right. And again, that was the issue.
He should have got thrown out of the T-Wolves game. He should have went nuts and got thrown out and tried to see if that would spark him.
And he rarely does that.
And he doesn't need to be on. He didn't need to be on the sideline in that game.
Yeah, I can't remember a game where Alvin Gentry's been thrown out.
Okay, because that's not his DNA.
That's not what he does. Right. That's not what he does. But to your point, no, the vocal leader. Again, I think Alvin Gentry, who again allows players to kind of police themselves. Yeah. I think it works with a veteran team. I don't think it works for the team where you're meshing veterans with again a young core and a young core that's going to have to play. I mean, and that's that's my next question. At what point do you start saying, okay, you got to pull the plug on this, and now Jackson Hayes has to play more, Nickeil Alexander has to play more, Frank Jackson has to play more, where you start playing more of the young players?
No. I don't think this year. I think you're still trying to figure out what balance, what core of veterans and youth that you want to keep together. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of that. You can't play give up, even at the end when you know you're out of the playoffs. I think they still need to figure out who's going to be part of this team in the future and who's not, and that you can't do that playing young guys.
Well said.
As far as you agree?
Yeah, I agree completely with you.
It's going to be interesting to see again because you've got a situation where Etron Moore's contract is ending. Derek Favors' contract is ending. To me, again, this is a guard-heavy team. If you're looking toward the future, you're probably going to have to get if Favors wants to stick around, I don't think you can pay him $17 million.
No, but he's going to come back. I would think he's going to come back.
I think it's got to be, and I don't know of many NBA players that are willing to take pay cuts. That's the other part of it. It'll be interesting to see again what happens there. And then again, I still think you need a young, more physical center. Jackson Hayes is going to be a nice player as he gains weight, as he learns the NBA game. But right now, again, coming 1 year from Texas, not playing a lot of high school basketball. I mean, he's a pup when it comes. He is. Yeah. The thing that blew my mind was lost against Dallas last night on offense. Yeah. He's been a guy that on offense has really been spectacular at times, but lost. I mean, getting the ball into the post, he has no idea where the ball's coming from. Defensively, he's been lost since he's hit the court. Nikhil Alexander-Walker went down to Erie, played very, very well. Yeah, he played 2 games. Played very well. Yeah. Played very well, but he's a guy that needs some playing time as well. But again, everything revolves around Zion and what he's ultimately going to do.
Yeah. I'd like to see more, and he played a little bit more last night, but the more that I see of Frank Jackson, and I've been saying this, yes, I love this kid, and I think he can be a real player for this team if he could stay healthy, obviously. But the more that he gets in there and the more he gets a feel, I think the kid can play.
Yeah, and the other part of it is Frank Jackson and both Frank Jackson and Brandon Ingram, both restricted free agents. Yeah. They have the right of first refusal. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. You know they're bringing Brandon Ingram back. The question is what's going to happen with Frank Jackson.
Right.
Guys, as far as the playoffs go, Jim, you think it's over at this point?
Oh, it's to me it's been over. And if it wasn't over, it was certainly over when they lost to the T-Wolves. I just don't. For them to go to the playoffs, they got 20 games left.
20 left, yes.
You have to think that they'd have to go somewhere in the neighborhood of 15-5 at the minimum. That's if Memphis goes 500 down the stretch. Mm-hmm. I don't see a 15-5 run out of this team. I just don't.
Right. Well, also, J.J. Redick has hurt him as well.
That definitely hurts. Having that veteran guy out there that can hit the three. Although Melly shocked me last night making that big three to put him into overtime. Of all the options that you have last night, and you need a three-pointer, I know he can hit it, but he was 0 for 7 from the.
Well, to your point, he's played really well the second half of the season. I mean, again, it took him a while to acclimate himself to the NBA. But again, I look at him again. He's not afraid to take the shot. He has a nice outside shot. He is a willing rebounder. He is technically sound when he plays defense as well. So a guy that has a lot of experience on the European side of basketball, but again had to kind of get himself acclimated to what was going on in the NBA. And I think he's, as you look at down the stretch here, he's definitely a keeper for this team down.
Look, they have the schedule that favors them.
Right, the easiest schedule in the NBA.
But what does that mean if you can't beat the T-Wolves at home?
It's the truth.
So I just don't. 15-5 for a team that's young. If you had a couple more veterans in there and you would be able to lean on, maybe. But I just don't see it.
To your point, and I mentioned this on the radio show the other day after the Timberwolves loss. You cannot, if you're a 26-win team, and even though you're playing well and everybody's throwing accolades at you, bouquets, and says they believe that you're going to be in the NBA playoffs, you cannot think that you can just show up and beat a 17-win team. You're below 500 too. I mean, again, it's not like, again, you're one of the top echelon teams in the NBA. Both these teams are in the same boat right now. Only difference is Minnesota has the injuries late, where the Pelicans had the injuries early.
Yeah. They gave Minnesota a reason to believe they could win it.
Oh, they did. Absolutely, they did.
So,
but it goes back to the Sean Payton thing. Very rarely do you see a Saints team show up that's unprepared, no matter who they play.
True.
Right.
And this team walked in focusing on Dallas the next night because they had a back-to-back. It was Zion's first back-to-back. Not thinking about Minnesota. What happens? You lose.
But we have seen this Saints team at times take teams lightly. That happened a couple times this season, much like, again, what they did last night.
But they're not for lack of preparation.
No, I would agree with that. But to me, again, that shows the immaturity of this Pelicans team, and it may end up costing them. I thought the San Antonio game was going to cost them, where they didn't leave Zion in, and especially having to probably vie against the Spurs for that 8th seed. But again, now when you look at it, it may come down to this Minnesota game, and of course the 13-game losing streak and the 6-22 start. It all kind of meshes together. Yeah. Guys, let's switch to the Saints. Saints. Now in their off season, Drew Brees is going to re-sign with the Saints. There was a report today, once again, that Brees says he can play till he's 45 again. There was a time when I bought into that. I'm not buying into that anymore. I mean, again, at this point, look, we know that the long ball is not once what it was in terms of his ability to throw it deep. But again, I still think he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I think you give him a strong running game and a strong defense and some weapons on offense, I think the Saints team is going to be fine. I have said that I believe in this contract negotiation, he has to be more definitive with the Saints on how long he's going to play. You can't have it year to year as it was before, because you have to make some decisions long term on ultimately who is going to back him up. You have a nice backup in Teddy Bridgewater, who's going to be moving on now. I'm not buying into Taysom Hill, but we'll talk about that in a moment as maybe the heir apparent here. But your thoughts on Brees coming back, and do you really buy into this 45, play to 45 thing?
I don't buy into that. Father Time's undefeated. We all know that. And he can't throw the ball deep anymore. But I agree, he's still one of the top 10 quarterbacks. He's been there, done that. There's a rapport between he and Peyton. Need to get him another receiver. Maybe a tight end, may have a revisit. Somebody, Jimmy Graham, Green Bay Packers are done with Jimmy Graham. Sean Payton has shown he's demonstrated the ability to bring people back, like Roman Harper and a few others. So don't be surprised if Jimmy Graham ends up wearing black and gold again. It'll depend on the contract. But back to Brees, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and everybody knows that. But when they know he can't throw the deep ball, they can play to that, and scheme in that direction. And then you got to come in with Taysom Hill, and I don't think he's a quarterback. That's just my opinion. But if they have a running game and another receiver along with Michael Thomas, they'll be able to score points. And then, with the old thing, score 30, hold them to 20, you're going to win 12, 13 games. So, that's where it's got to be with Drew Brees. And, can he be effective for 16 games, 17 down the road? Right. But I don't believe he plays till he's 45.
Yeah. As far as Jimmy Graham goes, if you remember the contract that he signed with Green Bay, the Saints really wanted to have him back. It was, again, ultimately, Green Bay offered him a contract. The Saints weren't in a position to be able to match at that point. He ends up with the Green Bay Packers. It'll be interesting to see if he comes in, because then you got two tight ends that are over 30 at that point, and I think they need to go ahead and draft a younger tight end, along with a guy like Josh Hill, who's kind of an everything guy for him going forward. What are your thoughts on Brees?
My thoughts on Brees, you asked me to make it through 45. I don't think he can make it through this season.
You don't think he can make it through the season?
No. If you look at the last two seasons ago, he broke down, you can definitively say, after about week 12, heading into that Cowboys game, that was week 12. Well, what was his 12th game this year? The Vikings playoff game. I don't think that he can make it through a whole season and be I think he'd be effective for the first half of the season. I think he'd be effective into they're going to have to find a way to put him on a pitch count. I hate saying that. I hate the thought of a two-quarterback system. But if you want the Drew Brees that we all know and love to be healthy going into the playoffs, and obviously for this team, it's playoffs or bust. It's almost NFC Championship or bust at this point with a 42-year-old quarterback, soon to be, by the time you get to the playoffs.
Sure.
He's not playing until he's 45, and I was surprised that he came back. Honestly, when he took that long, I thought he was going to say, look, I've enjoyed my time. I had 3 or 4 weeks off. Brittany and I have enjoyed the time with the kids, and I'm riding off into the sunset. I really thought that was going to happen, but I don't see him playing maybe one more year after this. They might sign him to a 2-year deal and see what happens. But if Taysom Hill's the quarterback, he's 30 years old.
Right.
You got to find. His style play. It's like Steve Young. Steve Young got in for Joe Montana when he was 29 years old. That's true. So this is the time. I'm not saying he's Steve Young, but I think he's along the lines of that ilk, and nobody knows.
Right.
There isn't you can say he looks like we don't know.
Right. Interesting to your point, because a lot of what came out of Super Bowl week was a conversation about Taysom Hill and also Drew Brees splitting time, where again there would be Brees would probably be the starter here, but there would be a certain series where Taysom would come in and he would have that incomplete series. Wouldn't just come in for a couple plays, he'd come in for a series. Mike Florio had talked about it. Glazer had talked about being the heir apparent and then the possibility of, again, splitting time. You think that may happen this year?
Who loves a challenge more than Sean Payton? And very, very rarely do you see that in the NFL. You saw it a little bit with Lamar Jackson when he was first coming in and spelling Flacco at times, and we all knew that Lamar Jackson was the heir apparent. We don't know that Taysom Hill is the heir apparent. but there's only one way to find out. And you cannot, if you even think that it's possible, you can't wait any longer. And Breeze has to have time off. So this is the perfect storm for them to be able to do that. I think it's going to happen. And I think they need it to happen because, honestly, I think you need Breeze. There are going to be times when I think, oh, Breeze has tweaked his ankle. He needs to take this game off. You're playing Tampa this week or whatever. I mean, Tampa's going to be better, I think. But there are going to be times when I think Taysom needs to play a whole game. It's going to happen. He's going to be the backup quarterback, and I think they need to draft a quarterback as well.
Right. That was going to be one of my questions. Now, to the point that Jim's making.
Yeah, we don't know if Taysom Hill can do it because we haven't seen. But as Jim said, one way to find out is put him out there. I don't think he could be the guy that takes all 55 or 60 snaps, deep in own territory, do the whole thing, do the whole picture. But I got to defer to Sean Payton. He knows far more than I, obviously, and he's not going to put him out there if he doesn't think he can do it. But then, it's the age-old thing that all coaches, sometimes you got to put a kid out there, or in this case, put a man out there, and let them decide for you whether or not they can do it. And, two-quarterback system, but, maybe like Jim said, you're going to play somebody that's not real good. You give him the whole first half, regardless. And then if you get way up, keep Breeze out, the rest of the game, whatever. But, it's tough, but, Drew Brees is not going to be the quarterback forever. Somebody else is going to be the quarterback soon.
Very soon.
If not real soon. So, and he's one injury away from, like last year, he busted up the hand. So, Eric, I'm just not sold on Hill.
I was the dummy a few years ago who said I thought Sean Payton's time was up after those 3 7-9
Well, and why wouldn't you, based on what you were saying?
Correct. So, as Tommy said, I'm to the point where he's obviously – I was wrong about that, and so I'm going to defer to him. And if he thinks that that's the right thing to do, then we all need to follow and trust his judgment because he sure knew what he was talking about this year with – he brought Teddy back, and I'm like, why are you bringing Bridgewater back? And not that he was great, but he certainly he knew how to adjust to make Teddy Bridgewater good enough to win football games.
Yeah, and that's what, the fans sometimes lose the perspective. Sean Payton's with these guys basically 24/7.
Sure.
He's in the meeting rooms. They're watching film together. They're doing everything together. They're on the practice field. They're talking while they're walking in the parking lot. He knows far better than 70,000 fans put together, okay? That's just the fact of it. And he is not going to run him out there if he doesn't think he's going to make him be successful. There's not a coach in the world, that's going to run a guy out there with the idea that I'm going to put him out there to fail. He's going to put him out there because he believes he can succeed.
What's interesting is two things. First of all, you look at the jack of all trades, which is the Swiss Army knife that is Taysom Hill. If he is truly your backup quarterback, what we saw when Teddy Bridgewater took over was that he did not do a lot of the things that we were accustomed to him doing because he was the backup quarterback, and that hurt that particular role. Now, you solve that by adding weapons. If you add weapons, then you don't need Taysom Hill to be a receiver or a tight end or be a running back. And again, I fully expect them to do that in the offseason. The other part of it is, and you heard Peyton talk about the future of the next quarterback, that it will be a different offense and a different style. How do you do that within season, splitting time with the quarterbacks and having one guy run one set of plays or a set of plays that are for him that is a completely contrasting style from your starter? Teddy Bridgewater was a little bit different. He managed the game. He wasn't Breeze, but he managed the game. With Taysom Hill, it would be radically different than what we would see with Breeze.
Well, there's no doubt, but that's why you have two different kinds of running backs. You have Latavius Murray, you have Alvin Kamara, two completely different kinds of running backs. They're going to get a speed receiver. They're going to change some things, and on the offensive side of the ball that can make them faster, that can make someone. Taysom can throw the deep ball. We don't know how accurate because we haven't seen it enough. But you got to have someone that's going to be able to do that. Drew can't throw it that far anymore. You're going to see they already have different sorts. They have players that I think that can adjust to having two different kinds of offenses on the same team at the same time.
The other thing Bridgewater had prior to his knee injury in Minnesota, he had enough of a snapshot where he showed he could play in this league and be very successful. And so he had that going for him. Did Hill even throw 20 passes in a game?
No.
In the season last year?
20 in the season.
Okay, he threw 13, 14. Yeah, so again, like Jim said, he was wrong. I don't think Hill is the next quarterback. I could be wrong. I can handle that. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. That doesn't bother me. But I don't see him as that guy that's going to go out there and go 28 for 36 with
I'd
3
like to
touchdowns.
find out. Because
that goes back to what you said. We got to find out.
If he can throw 35, 40 times and complete 65% of his passes, then what you have is a mini version of Lamar Jackson, except a guy that can bowl over linebackers.
A more physical Lamar Jackson.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'd like to find out. And there's only one way to find out. He's 30 years old. You either find out now or you're not finding out.
Right. Which means, again, that we'll have to put a first-round tender on him to be able to try to keep teams away from him. And then, even if that happens, you have to be in a position where you're willing to be able to match whatever a team. If a team really feels like Peyton feels that he can play, be a starting quarterback in the NFL, then at that point, there's going to be a team that's going to take a flyer on him. The first-round pick may keep him away from it.
There's no one that's going to spend a first-round pick on a 30-year-old guy who's never, who has only thrown 20 passes in his NFL career.
Guys, we'll take a quick break. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Jim Derry of the St. Tammany Farmer. Also, again, VSN Louisiana. Tommy KRYSAN of Talking Sports with TK. I'm your host, Eric Astor. Quick message from our underwriter. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more Saints, and we'll jump into some LSU, Tulane, UNO, all coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stick around.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Tommy KRYSAN, Talking Sports with TK. Jim Derry of the St. Tammany Farmer, as well as VSN Louisiana. Guys, I've been asking the panelists over the last few weeks about Alvin Kamara. Kamara has his agent has moved into the Clutch Sports Agency. We all know what happened with Anthony Davis and of course, Mickey Loomis, the kind of back and forth there, not wanting to deal with the Los Angeles, not want to really have their arm twisted into trading Anthony Davis at midseason last year. Kamara's coming off an injury-riddled season, but again, he is a big part of this offense. But yet, running backs have been devalued in the NFL. When you look at the top running backs, what they're making somewhere between 15, 12, 13 million a year, the question is, when you're trying to add other pieces to this offense and some pieces of defense and re-sign your own, can they afford an Alvin Kamara based on what maybe he believes his value is? Do you think that Kamara's here long term? Do you think there'll be a holdout this year with Kamara, who is under contract for this year and the last year of his rookie deal? Next year is an unrestricted free agent. What do you think happens with Alvin Kamara?
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I think he's a key to the Saints because he can run the football, he catch the ball at the backfield, and he does a decent job picking up the blitz. So I think they got to do everything they can do to keep him and keep him long term. I mean, it's better for the Saints if he's a Saint long time.
I think that his injury last year affects his value. I think it also affects what could possibly happen when. I don't think you're going to see a holdout with Alvin Kamara, and I do think you're going to see a deal done. The difference between the NFL and the NBA is, with the NBA, I mean, AD you knew he was going somewhere else from the day that he got here. The NFL is a completely different story.
True.
Players don't want to leave the Saints if they don't have to. I mean, 9 times out of 10, a player loves it here and they want to stay here. I mean, and if Sean Payton wants them, 9 times out of 10, they're going to stay.
make the deal.
And there's no question that Sean Payton wants Alvin Kamara. And I think, you know, that whenever a running back goes through some sort of ankle sprain, especially a high ankle sprain, it's going to affect him the rest of the year.
No doubt.
I think when you see him come training camp, he'll be fine, and he will be a Saint for a while.
Take you first. Upcoming needs for the Saints, draft, free agency.
I think number one need is a speed receiver. And then I think there's a tie between offensive line and quarterback. And I hate to say that you need to draft a quarterback high. I don't know. Sean Payton knows better than I do, but you've got to have at least another offensive lineman, preferably a guard, that could come in for this team and maybe even start right away, because we don't know what's going on. Larry Warford has been a concern for me last year. And so I think they're going to draft an offensive lineman high. The Saints, but I think number one has got to be a speed receiver. You got to. I don't think Ruggs is still going to be there around there, but maybe you make a deal for him or something along those lines. But you got to get somebody along those lines.
A guy named Jordan Jefferson really helped him in the.
Well, there's no question
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, you got to get somebody opposite Michael Thomas to put a little more pressure, a little more threat on the defense. And, you know, and Jim's right. You got to have the offensive line, because without the line, none of it works.
Right.
So, you know, that's a cliche, but it all starts up front. You win the game at the line of scrimmage on both sides of football. So I would think they have to do that. And then we got to defer to Sean Payton on the quarterback thing. If whenever they pay, they've shown
just not another Garrett Grayson.
They've shown an ability they've demonstrated the ability that they'll move around on draft day to get a guy or not. That's always been the case with Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton. So, you know, if there's a quarterback that they absolutely like, whomever, I don't have to say names, there's 5, 6 top ones out there. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they go for somebody. But in the quarterbacks in the draft, there's a gap between that first 5 or 6 and the rest of them.
I'm going to throw out a name for you, Eric. Jordan Love. I think that's.
I knew he was going to say that.
To me, that's the guy that he would. There's all kinds of things you could do with that kid. He, to me, could be a big physical Drew Brees. I love the way, and that's a kid to me. I think if you want to get a speed receiver in the first round, and if that kid's there when you draft in the second round, or maybe even move up a little bit, I definitely could see Sean Payton going to get a quarterback like that.
Of course, Saints don't have a second-round pick because of the McCoy deal this year.
You make a move. I'm saying you make a move and you get up there.
There's no doubt. And of course, he's a guy that was projected to come to the Saints on a lot of these mock drafts. He's kind of moved up the draft board a little bit. But you know, again, to your point,
he's going to be. He's an NFL quarterback. Out of all these guys we're talking about, and obviously Joe Burrow is going to be, I think, going to be a great NFL quarterback.
Right.
I think Tua is going to be a good quarterback. Justin Herbert, I'm not sure, but I want to watch this Love kid and see what he does in the NFL.
The only question about Love is who did he play against?
Well,
week in, week out.
That's true, but who did Drew Brees? They didn't win any games at Purdue. Yeah. I don't know.
Let's shift gears to LSU, guys. Mickey Joseph has now been named assistant head coach. He's the still wide receivers coach. Cornerback coach Corey Raymond is now going to take on the role of recruiting coordinator. Kelvin Shepard, the former linebacker, is going to come back over and take over director of player personnel, because Kevin Falk is now the running back coach. Bo Pelini is now the defensive coordinator for this team. And Scott Linehan is now the passing coordinator. Talk about the changes on the coaching staff of the LSU Tigers.
Other than Linehan, there's a lot of purple and gold in the lineage here, these guys. And, you know, Ed Orgeron believes in Louisiana. He's a Louisiana guy. In fact, for the first time in 85 years, the AD and the head football coach at LSU are both from the state of Louisiana. Right. So, you know, you got to defer to Ed Orgeron. We keep using that term. You know, I trust him. He's putting people in there who he thinks can continue to build on what they have built. And I think the coaching changes are fine. I don't have any problem with them. I think you bring in Linehan. You bring in Falk, these guys that have been in the NFL, because all these kids want to play in the NFL.
Right.
All 85 of them on scholarship think they're going to play in the NFL. So when you got guys that have been there, done that, I mean, Linehan was a head coach.
Half of them might.
Linehan was a head coach for 3 years, didn't have a tremendous amount of sex, but he was still one of 32 guys coaching the NFL football team for 3 years. So I think that resonates with these kids. That, hey, we can show you how to get to the league. We know people in the league we can call if you end up on the borderline, which happens every day. These coaches are wearing each other out on the phone. So I like all the staff changes, and I think it's all pointing in a good direction.
Jim?
Well, first of all, I got to start with Mickey Joseph, because he and I went to Shaw together.
Okay.
So green and white, Hank Tierney, baby. We
won't hold that against you, but okay.
So he's a Shaw Eagle. He's
Holy Cross.
Exactly.
A bunch of Catholic League guys here.
Exactly.
Man, it's good.
But I like the Linehan hire. I'm not sold on Bo Pelini. Again, same with the Saints. I mean, this team's coming off a national championship. How can you doubt anything that they do, right? And Coach O is, again, he proved me wrong as well, because I thought I wasn't sure how things were going to transfer over, and we talked before the show started. I didn't think this was a 10 or 11 win team coming into the season. I thought 10 maybe was the ceiling. Boy, they proved me wrong, and a lot of people wrong. Not this guy.
Well, they had so much talent, and I just banked on the fact that Burrow had a lot under his belt last year, then a spring practice. He didn't come in until May before the 18 season, so I just thought all of that, and I was one who knew how much talent, because they're going to put so many guys into the NFL off of that team. It's not even funny. Definitely into an NFL camp. They might not all stick on a roster, but they're all going to get a shot.
Eric, I do worry about some of the defensive losses. I mean, obviously, a team of this caliber is going to lose every year. You're going to lose players. I think they can manage it on offense if they can figure out the quarterback position. But on defense, I'm just really worried. Bo Pelini's really going to have his hands full with all the studs that they're losing on defense.
Well, the good news is for Bo Pelini is he plays a 4-3.
Yeah.
So again, they are very, very good up front right now, still with the returning linemen.
No doubt.
They're going to have to figure out what they have to do at linebacker, and of course the secondary's got some studs back in the secondary. To me, and we're seeing a lot of experimentation right now in spring, as you always do. The biggest thing to me that's got to come out of spring is Miles Brennan has to be able to set himself up and to prove to everybody he's a starting quarterback for this team.
Well, Ed Orgeron, basically, when he met with the media this week, he said he's the guy. He's going to be a championship quarterback. He's just putting it all on Brennan's plate, saying, you're the guy. I don't care if you screw up the first day of spring practice. You're still the guy. You got to get out there and show us that you're going to take this team over and you're going to be the starting quarterback. Because like Taysom Hill, he hadn't thrown many passes, none that meant anything, And you got nobody else there that even took a snap, with Finley and Parrish and Johnson, So I mean, it's got to be Brennan, unless he just can't get the job done and one of them guys emerges.
Or a graduate transfer.
Yeah, well, don't rule that out. He kept a few slots open on that, and they were after the DERRY King, and that didn't work. But, right now, Brennan's your starter against Texas San Antonio when they open the season.
You don't have a choice.
No, you don't really have a choice unless Brennan just really goes south and one of these other guys steps up, because then you got the Longhorns in town the next week.
Right.
So, no, that's the biggest thing in spring training. Is can Brennan grab the bull by the horns?
He's got to establish himself as the starter.
He's
got to.
Johnson's going to be breathing down his neck. I think that's the
kid's
neck.
good.
He is good, and he obviously comes from good lineage. And
he's very smart. Like Burrow, he's very smart.
Absolutely. And so I think that would be the only threat, but I don't see any way that you can't go into the season without Miles Brennan being the starting quarterback.
Tulane's got the same issue.
Yeah.
Okay, right now when you look at Keon Howard, Michael Pratt is the freshman. He's an early enrollee, so he's getting a little bit of maybe a little head start on Ibieta out of Country Day, who they really like as well.
Why wouldn't they? That kid can play football.
You've seen him play
many times.
A lot of upside.
Talk about him.
Justin Ibieta is one of the most athletic, phenomenon, smart. You went to Country Day. This kid can absolutely play at the next level. You're talking about a kid too that wasn't even sure that he wanted to play football until a couple years ago. He was a baseball kid. He played basketball. He played every sport at Country Day. But I'm telling you right now, he grew to love football under Joe Chango, and he was the heart and soul of that team. I mean, if they don't have him last year, they're like a 2-8 team. Instead, they make it to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I mean that's a big get for Tulane. That's
Absolutely.
a great job for the Tulane staff.
He will start at some point. I'm not sure if they're going to let him play. If they're going to let him do both, I don't think that.
But he has the ability to do it.
Oh, there's no question. He is definitely a college baseball player as well.
Hampton do it, and Hampton doesn't have to go to spring practice this year. That was all part of the recruiting deal. So I was just curious if I
don't think they have said
think
yet.
It's all football.
I think he's going to
sit here tonight. Okay.
I think he's going to focus on football.
But that's a big get for Tulane.
I think that within, maybe not this year, but he is going to be the starting quarterback at Tulane.
Guys, let's take a call. Toby is in Gretna. Toby, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Toby.
Hey, Eric. You think the Saints should I'm sorry, I'm getting brain dead. Trade back
in the draft?
And I know Sean Payton doesn't like to do it, but you think he should do it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Guys, they're at 24. We've seen him move up a lot. No, he's never really moved back, but they don't have that second-round pick. This is a draft where, you know, especially if you look at the receiver position, there could be some quality receivers in the second round as well. What do you think happens?
What I think is Sean Payton has 2 targets when he goes into his draft, and what he thinks will be around either 12 to 18 or around where he picks, and he has those 2 targets. If those 2 targets are in his range, I don't think he's moving back. If anything, he's moving up. He's not a move back kind of guy because he's always got targets.
Right.
But nothing surprises me with this group, and they have done so much better in the drafts since Jeff Ireland has been around. So anything's on the table, but I would think there's way more likelihood of them moving up than there is a movement back.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's going to have some guys he wants to get. Now, if those guys come off the board, that would be the only way I see him moving back. If he could get 2 early picks in the second round,
Yes.
you know, get somewhere 5th and 8th, 5th and 9th in the second round, and he doesn't have his targets are gone for whatever the reason.
Yes.
That's why, I mean, I'm not a fan of mock drafts. I mean, because you have one trade and screw them all up.
all
But it gives us all something to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like playing the lottery.
That's true. Guys, let's talk a little bit about college basketball for a few minutes. First of all, again, Tulane is 12-17 overall, 4-13 in the AAC, as we've talked about on this program, the radio show. Ron Hunter's going to have to be getting his wetsuit or his swimsuit. He'll be in Lake Pontchartrain because they will finish in last place in the AAC. They've been playing much better basketball.
Yes.
They took Memphis to overtime last weekend, so they're playing better basketball down the stretch here, but not enough to get out of last place. UNO has been beset by injuries all season long. Coach Sless is just a heck of a quarterback, a coach, as is Coach Hunter. But they're 8-21, they're 4-15, and they're going to have to reload for next season. LSU now 20-11, 11-6, 4th place in the SEC. They're hanging on to that double bye in the SEC tournament right now, but they lost to Arkansas last night. That was hard to watch. But you know what? They were exposed as well, guys, because they've been exposed also really since the Vanderbilt game in terms of how teams can beat them. Again, everybody going to the boards. There were defensive rotations not where they need to be able to stop the 3-point shot. But when you got to go, when you get in foul trouble like they did last night, and you got to go to Graves, Cooper, and Bishop, that shows you the lack of depth on this team.
Well, they don't have a point guard. They missed Tremont Waters.
There's no
They don't have
doubt.
somebody to run the show out there. And, you know, I'm not real comfortable. You know, Will Wade's throwing these kids under the bus a lot, showing his frustration a lot.
True.
It's one thing to close the door to the locker room and say what you want to say, but I'm not comfortable with the way he's trying to give himself the out. Like, this is all the guys I got. They don't learn from their mistakes.
Well, he recruited them.
Yeah, you gave him a uniform, Coach.
Right.
You set them on the floor.
Right.
But, you know, inconsistency, and they don't have a point guard. In college basketball, you got to have a point guard if you're going to make a run in the tournament. It's a guard game now. It's not a big man game like it was many years ago. They don't have a point guard, which could set. Skylar Mays would be a good 2 guard, but they had nobody to set him up.
Right.
When's the last time you saw Coach K or Tom Izzo throw a player under the bus?
Never.
Never. It doesn't happen. You don't do that as a coach. He has now, to me, made so many missteps in the last year. And I'm, you know, how can you, LSU successful for the first time in a while in basketball and look like with the recruiting class that they keep getting, it looks like they can remain successful. But I got to be honest, my patience is growing thin with this guy.
Right.
You know, as a guy who went to LSU and bleeds purple and gold when I'm not covering him.
Sure.
You can't do those kinds of things, and you lose your players when you do.
Yeah.
And you look, it's had an effect on Skylar Mays, who to me is an outstanding basketball player, obviously smarter than us 3 guys combined, probably.
No doubt.
Exactly, but
Yeah, no, he's a
you know,
sharp kid.
to me, he's different. He hasn't played the same. They're not playing with the same emotion. And this is a team to me that it plays with a lot of runs. They're successful when they have nice runs.
Yes.
They're not playing with emotion. They're not getting those runs.
They're very athletic, but they don't play team basketball because they don't have a point guard. I mean, Mays is lost out there. He doesn't know what to, I mean, it's just, they got some athletes, but, you know, it's almost like an intramural game or game at recess when they play. And
I don't know if he's lost, though, if he's lost his heart.
Right. Unlike last season with defections of the NBA, every single player on that team, including Trenton Walford, Smart, they all have to come back. I mean, to me, none of these guys are NBA ready, and I think it's been proven this season. Guys, let's talk a little college baseball with the few minutes we have left. First of all, after a slow start, UNO has kind of come back. They lost to the SWAC schools early. They're 8-5 now, so again, they're starting to play really good baseball. Tulane has been absolutely spectacular. They are 10-2 right now. Olthoff tossed the 6 innings of flawless ball against Middle Tennessee State over the weekend. Well, I had the no-hitter going. It ended up being Clifton Slagle and Kagan Gillis came in and finished out the no-hitter for the Tulane Green Wave. They're playing really good baseball right now.
Yeah, and you know, I think that 2 out of 3 and almost a sweep of Fullerton,
yes, that was
to me
huge.
Has really given them a boost, and it's given life to this program. They've got a lot of players, and I'm really interested to see what happens the next couple weeks with Tulane before they get into conference play.
Don't underestimate Daniel Latham, the pitching coach.
Oh, absolutely.
This guy is top line, top of the line.
You see
Southeastern misses him with them right now. The last couple of years, he is big time. I've known him and his family forever. But don't underestimate the job he is doing and will do with that pitching staff.
Right. Trevor Minden hits for the cycle for him again. So again, getting some hitting as well. LSU 8-5. They were no hit by Oklahoma. It really kind of hurt because AJ Labus throws a 2-hitter.
No hitter into the hit.
Right. They've got the pitching. The question is for them, and Jim, I'll take you first on this one. What about the hitting?
Well, to me, it's not a lot different than what's happened the past few years. It takes a while for this team to gel, and you can't just have everything, relying on a couple guys. You can't have everything on Cade Beloso and Danny Cabrera. I mean, so they're going to have to figure a way to gel, and I think it's because they lose so many guys every year, and it takes them a while to get together. I think they'll be fine. I think their pitching staff is fine, and I think once you get in the middle of conference play, forget about these midweek games and you losing 2 out of 3 here and there. I mean, it is what it is. They're playing top-notch teams. LSU baseball will be fine.
Got the final word on the Tigers.
Alan Dunn told me it was the deepest pitching staff he's had at LSU. Now, they don't have a Gosman or a Renato or a Nola, but deep. They got lots of arms. But I don't know a lot of things, but I know if you don't get a hit, you probably don't win the game, okay? It's a marathon, not a sprint. Same thing with UNO. You got to let the thing unfold, okay? UNO's in Southland's a great baseball conference.
It is.
So, you got to let this thing go. Fans want to be quick. We live in this immediate world because of the smartphones. College baseball, the biggest cliche is it's a marathon, not a sprint. Very true. Glad the Green Wave are off to a good start. Paul Maneri's teams have demonstrated playing better baseball in May over the years while he's been at LSU. So I think you're good with all of those teams.
Be nice to see, again, Tulane, UNO, LSU having really good seasons and having a chance to be able to get in to the tournament.
I think they'll all get in. I think all 3 of them will get in.
That would be awesome. That would be really good. Guys, before we get out of here, Tommy, tell everybody about the podcast.
Talking Sports with TK, all your major platforms. Follow me on social media. Tommy KRYSAN. Connect with me, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I got an LSU spring football preview podcast that'll be released midday Friday, be available. You can always scroll back and see previous podcasts. Talking Sports with TK, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, TuneIn, and many others.
Tell us about VSN Louisiana, Jim, and also, again, what you're doing for the St. Tammany Farmer and the Advocate.
VSN Louisiana, we just had a playoff broadcast game last Monday. That's also, we're simulcasting a lot of these games on CST, on Cox Sports Television, so look for that. I'm the sports editor of the St. Tammany Farmer, which is North Shore arm of the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans Advocate, and I think we cover high school sports better than anybody in the state. and it helps that we have Robin Fambro in Baton Rouge and in the
Hall of Famer.
in the Acadiana Bureau. So we got a lot of things going on at Jim Derry Jr. on Twitter.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being on the panel tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also, Pelican Sports Television every Friday night, 9 o'clock on Pelican. Catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeartRadio app. That is noon to 2. Listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes of this program can also be seen at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our underwriters. We appreciate every single one of those guys. Also, special thanks to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. Thanks to Jim Derry and also Tommy KRYSAN. I'm Eric Asher. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.